40% of kids saying they hate school. We have to find a way in education to bring those kids to school. We got to figure out a way to make them enjoy it, at least just for a little bit.
What we're trying to do is teach kids how to learn.
Some kids have never had success in school. You put them in front of a video game, they find success. Now I have a voice. Now people are listening to me.
I think people think we're teaching video games.
Right.
And that is absolutely not what we're doing.
You can bring this into a building with your teachers, and it's innovative to where the students are going to be a part of something that is just bigger than them.
Through gaming concepts, I really feel like I have even a stronger connection with students than I've had in the past 10 years of teaching.
Well, hello, folks. Welcome to another awesome day of the Gaming Concepts podcast. I'm here with my good friend, Dr. Michael Russell. Russ the Teach, how are we doing today?
Doing amazing.
Doing amazing.
Every day's a great day.
There you go.
Doing what we love.
There you go. Now we're a little bummed. We're not able to have our third host with us, Dr. Kristen Craft. She was unable to join us today, but we are forging ahead because we have an awesome guest to join us today, and just really looking forward to learning and growing together. But before we do that, Mike, tell us something exciting going on with you, Generation Esports, Gaming Concepts, your gaming world in general. What do you got, Mike?
Wow, man, there's so much. Well, been playing a little bit of the new WoW expansion. Super excited about that. One of my old students actually made a scene in that particular game. So that's kind of fun to see your kids go on and do great things in the industry that you're very passionate about. So my goal, I need to go find the exact spot because I'm going to go take a screenshot of myself standing in the spot that he made and post it. So I have not done that yet, but I will. Working away on the speech book and the speech and streaming book that we're working on. And one thing about Kristen, she now is our national sales director. So she got promoted. So she's doing amazing and swamped and busy and everything, but still passionate about all of the kids and everything, and excited to have her, doing that role. I think she's going to be amazing at it. So
good. Now, for those that don't know, WoW, Mike, what is WoW?
Oh, wow.
There may be some people that don't know what WoW is.
Yes, thank you. Christy often reminds me that I need to make sure that I explain things as I do this. So, yes, World of Warcraft. So, yes.
And this is a video game you play, correct? This is not
correct.
A board game.
Yes.
This is different than Dungeons and Dragons. This is
a video game. And last time I checked, which I recommend if you ever get into WoW, never do this, but there is a command in the game where you can do backslash played, and it'll tell you how much time you've played the game. Actually been in the game, and mine, the last time I checked, was 7 months.
Wow.
Like 7 months of actual in the game time, not I played for 7 months, like 3 hours a day.
Wow.
I spent 7 months, 24 hours a day in the game.
So I'm curious, Mike, how is that comparable to other typical WoW players? Is that like a normal amount of time?
I don't know. That's a great question, Trevor. I don't know the answer to that. I would say most of my friends, probably that's average because we all play together.
There you go.
But I don't know what the average, at one time, there were probably 14 million people playing WoW at any given time. So it's not quite that high now. They don't release the subscriber numbers anymore, but if I had to guess, I'd say there's probably 5 to 6 million people still play every day, or most every day.
Well, we'll have to check with our guests when we introduce them here in a few minutes if they're a WoW player or not.
Yes.
I know we're trying to do some World of Warcraft as a team building exercise about a month ago, and I was all gung-ho, and I lasted like 20 minutes, and my hands started cramping up, and my fingers weren't working quite right, and I was spinning all sorts of directions.
You get the permanent mouse hand, like
something
where you just have to, you just walk around like this. Your hands on the mouse all the time. So that's just how it is. Yeah.
I think I need some wrist exercises, Mike. So if you know any good curriculum to help me navigate the ergonomics, let me know. We can get that going.
We have some We have some of those things, Trevor, for
Okay.
you that might be coming in handy. You know, it takes 10,000 hours to master something, and I'm only halfway there on WoW. So I've got 5,000 more hours to go. So.
You better tell your wife that you need to play some more World of Warcraft. Then
So
I
I'm
might
not
try
quite a
that
master
too.
yet. I'm only halfway there. So
That's hilarious, man. Well, cool things going on in my world with not only gaming concepts but esports in general is we're getting ready to launch into our second semester, and so the spring major is getting ready to go, which means more and more schools are going to be participating in the competition side, and additionally schools that are getting on board with a full curriculum piece with gaming concepts because they're seeing, again, like we talk about every time, they're seeing the benefits of utilizing an esports pathway for their kids because this is what their kids love and they see the benefits in doing it. So it's every day I'm reminded again. I hear stories of students whose lives are changed because they're involved in esports, and that's ultimately what it's about: is helping kids find purpose and meaning. And really, I'm going to use that as a transition into our guest, if that's okay, Mike. If you're
yeah,
cool
absolutely.
with that, because the guest we have is going to be able to bring us some wisdom with the esports world. And so I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a minute, but we're going to play our game of Guess the Guest. Sound good, Mike?
Hey, let's do it.
Okay. So
I'm ready. Let's go.
this guest, I asked for 3 things and they gave me 4. So you already know they're an overachiever.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So number 1 of 4 started a statewide virtual schools program in 2003.
Wow.
So you think 2003, we're taking 10
That's a
years
long
ago
time ago.
in like
That's
technology world is
yeah.
massive.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's impressive for 2003. That's a big accomplishment right there. So,
Number 2, spend much of their time when doing research as an avatar.
ooh, an avatar.
Okay.
Huh? Okay.
5 children.
Hmm. Well,
That
it's
in and
not
of itself is an accomplishment, if you ask me.
it
So
is absolutely. It's not Mr. Brady because they had 6. But that was a joke.
here's the last one. Uh, Met his wife at an ISTE affiliate conference 7 years before they started to date. So I
Oh,
want to hear the story on that. And any guesses, Mike?
wow, that could be a lot of people. No, I don't have a guess. I'm sorry. Let me see. ISTE conference. Let's say Jim Rand.
Jim Rand. It is not Jim Rand, but they don't live that far apart, actually.
Oh,
I'm going to introduce Mr. Jeremiah Frink. Jeremiah, good morning, sir. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, and thank you.
yeah.
Yes, glad to have you. Glad to have you. So, Jeremiah, tell us a little bit about yourself. We know that you're currently serving with Dell as part of their Scholastic Esports program. So, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, and we'll kind of dive into a great conversation.
That sounds great. Yeah, so I am at Dell. I'm a senior education strategist, is the actual title. But what that really means is I consult with schools, school districts around lots of different things, not just esports. But I have been tasked as the team lead, focused specifically on esports in the K-12 environment, and so support across North America with that work. But before that, I was in education. So I was a teacher, administrative director. You kind of heard I had a chance to start up a online program along with a number of other things that I've had fun in education and have been at Dell since. So that's a little bit about me and what I've been doing. Oh, I live up in the Northeast, so I'm up in New York area. That's the reason why the whole close to your guess, but
Yes,
not your guess.
not quite, not
Yeah.
quite. Awesome. Well, I'm curious, kind of real quick. Give us a quick. You said you're in education. What did that look like specifically? Teacher, principal, instructional coach. Tell us a little bit about that piece.
You mean my background?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was started as a Spanish enrichment and technology coordinator back in the 90s. So there you go. Now you've got some age to go with some of that other information. But that's where I started, and then was an elementary teacher and did some, as you said, some technology coaching. Then moved into that more administrative role as I sort of was the principal for our virtual program as well as starting it. Moved into doing some directorship around professional learning, curriculum, as well as the technology integration. All of that sort of was under my purview. So, and then along the way, did pick up a PhD because those are real easy. You can pick them up a dime a dozen along the street. No, I spent about 10 years on that as well. And that's where I did some of my research around gaming and the beginnings of that kind of venture into the esports world. But yeah, so that's kind of been my journey, is kind of bouncing around in education before coming over to Dell anyway.
Yeah. So what did you do? When did you earn your PhD?
Yeah, that was finally in 2016, started in 2015. So,
yeah.
or not 2015, excuse me, 2005.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
yeah,
10-year track.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I just am curious, like, what kind of other like resources were you able to find on that, back then? Because I did mine on similar, my doctorate on similar things, and just to find prior literature on anything in esports was not super easy. Anything academic, there's a lot of anecdotal information, but any studies or anything. So I bet that was a challenge for you as you went through that as your process. So
yeah, and so what I worked on was really was focused more on just game development, thinking about the ways that game is designed and what we could learn about learning. A lot of the Jim G work was back then. I went and actually did some of my preliminary research looking at they called themselves a gaming studio, but it was an arena, and full of Alienware, and just it was when the Wii first came out, and really just focused in on the ways that relationships were built, the ways that they learned, the ways that they identified themselves. So looking at identity and how you kind of develop identity both as a gamer, but also that change in identity also helps you learn in more ways than just, the learning of the game and development of those skills. So that was where I kind of started. I ended up doing more with multi-user virtual environments. And that's why spent most of my time with my research as an avatar, is because I was actually in world interacting, as well as capturing what was happening in the classroom through some video recordings and things like that with the students. So I was looking at the ways that we sort of cross that, both how we interact virtually as well as, in the same space with each other. So it was really some interesting work, but like you said, around esports specifically, that research wasn't out there because people weren't looking at it as much. So I worked from a lot of the game-based type research, and then digital gaming as a basis.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm curious, kind of, Jeremiah, with kind of the avatar piece, was that a little bit of kind of pre-metaverse type thinking, or kind of seeing where that's going to go when people, we're still struggling to get into this whole metaverse world, and I'm not even quite sure how I feel about it personally yet. But was that a little bit of what you're kind of doing before that was really happening?
Yeah, so where I was at is in Second Life, which, please, listeners, don't go in there and think that this is Second Life is now the place to take your students. One, they don't want anyone under 18 in there anymore. But at that point in time, this was in the late 2000, early 2010, they were allowing you to set up these separate, what they called islands, so spaces. And then we invited people from actually around the world. We joined a collaborative of all high school level students who were in this space and creating, developing, interacting. And my students were also developing, just games more in the terms of scavenger hunts, going and finding, not, programming deep digital games. But they were doing that and interacting with students around the world. And so that was an interesting aspect. Like you said, it was I don't know if pre-metaverse, because we're still trying to define what metaverse really means and is. But it definitely was, it was not with headsets on. It was a flat screen, virtual world space, that sort of thing. But you did create the avatar, And so there were some interesting things around that. You did have more freedom in the world than you might have in a physical space, because you could move around, teleport, a lot of those same things we see in the metaverse. And you got to drive where you went. When you look at a more typical classroom, or even a lot of times games, you're guided down a path. But with these open world designs, it allowed us to really explore the creativity of the students and what their passions and interests were. So it allowed for things that were really powerful. I think that a lot of people called those games, and I always struggled with that, because really games, you have a story. And that wasn't a part of what was going on in there, unless you purposely carved out a space and created the story for a specific experience within it.
Super cool.
What kind of conclusions did you come to about how students interact, how they work together? Like, how did that then influence how you continued to kind of work in the education space? Because I think about 10 plus years ago, where technology was then, and even, a lot of that's pre a lot of the significant social media days as well, in many ways. What are some of the conclusions and realizations you came to based upon those observations? And I guess that's probably getting into a little bit of your doctoral work, but I'm kind of fascinated to think so much of what you're talking about is what we're trying to figure out now.
Exactly.
And you were doing it 10 plus years ago. And so how have things evolved as society has evolved, kind of with your conclusions? I know it's kind of a big overarching question, but it fascinates me here.
Yeah, well, as our colleague here also knows, they require, when you're doing your dissertation, to be able to bring it down to a short version. So I'll try and do that for you. But no, I'd say the big thing that I was focused on was looking at how it impacted the learning and what I was calling sort of the learning space within the classroom. So that encapsulated not just the activities you do, but that social aspect, as well as how you interacted, and that's why I studied both the virtual and physical space at the same time. And so I was looking at that to better understand, just like you said, what we're trying to figure out now. How could we use some of this in the classroom to enhance learning? And so that was my overarching sort of question. And what really became interesting was that the way that the teacher designed was to start out by saying, this is your world, and really turned it to the students. So I think there's a real important thing that we can take into esports too. A lot of times we develop the program for the students rather than developing it along with them. And I think that's a key aspect of what you need to think is this is their passion. Why are you trying to almost co-opt that by saying, great, we're going to use this, and now we've got this so that we'll get you to stay in school and come to your other classes? No, hang on, folks. Let's not dilute the passion that they have and really listen to the students. And I think that was one key piece that came out of it, because as we move forward with the study, the teacher, due to administrative pressure and some of the things happening in the district, it was a urban center that I was doing the research in. They were looking for much more of some assessments and what's the exact things it ties to the curriculum, which we had in there, but it scared the teacher a little bit. And she started doing almost worksheets while we're in this virtual world. And she was great, so this isn't negative. It was the pressure she was having and how do I make this work? Well, what was really interesting is, as the teacher who had started by saying, this is your world, students, and really opened it up to them, and she continued to do that in set times. But as she sort of started to pull back from that more open approach and giving it to the students, because they could, would continue in the world and continue to do the things that why she had it, where student is teacher, that connection and collaboration, communication with other students around the world, all those things that she was passionate about and still was, as she sort of had to close down, or she felt she did, the students kept doing it. So one key example that I love is that there was this one student, he was a hyper student, very clear on this, but he was up and helping another student, in the physical classroom. Well, the teacher says, nope, you need to go sit down. Each one needs to do their own work. Again, not her original goal. And as we reflected it together, she came back. So this was an amazing teacher. But as a student went back, I was in world and saw that, what did he do? He sat down, popped back up, right in world, right next to that student, and kept helping her. And
Yeah.
it was, to help them move forward. And so her goal of having the students as teachers continued because of the space and environment that she set up originally for them. So that was sort of the thinking, that we really need to be thoughtful about the way we design, the way we include the students as we move forward. All right, that was more than an elevator pitch. Sorry about that, my friends.
No, I find it very amazing. I mean, I think, as we went through the COVID app, the pandemic, I think had we been able to utilize the worlds like you're talking about, where there's other things for me to interact with, and I can go to this particular area and I can watch the teacher do the lesson, and then I can go over here, and then my friends are doing an activity, even though it's virtual, I can still be with my friends, as they're doing that. That would have been a much more, I think our learning during the pandemic process would have been at a much higher rate, because I'm still having the interaction with my friends, and I'm not just listening to the teacher tell me something for 45 minutes and then we take a break and for 45 minutes we do it again. I mean, there's so much more we could, and I know there's some technological challenges with that. So I mean, it wasn't ready yet, but I'm very confident and hopefully this never happens again, but if we were to have this same issue again with a pandemic, I think we would be much better prepared from an educational level, that we kind of know more of what to do and how to make it more engaging for the kids, because that was the problem. We lost all the engagement from the students, in my opinion, that they just weren't. There's no reason for me to go. I mean, when kids tell you they enjoy school more when they're not in school, that's a problem, and that we found that all over the place. So so I think really too, to your work. So
well, thank you. I think to your point, though, as you were saying, I think that even if, we really do not want another pandemic, and I think we definitely address it differently structurally. However, as we think of the future of these students, and digital communication interaction is going to be a part of it, as we think about tying this back into esports, kind of our conversation here, and some of the things we learned around, do students have access? And if so, do we go to the lowest common denominator because it's a limited access of communication? Or to your point, do we think about some of the tools and resources we might leverage that they do have, that we are able to utilize to make it meaningful and design for learning, design for their growth and development, instead of, as you said, Zoom marathon?
Yeah. Well, and your point too about the buy-in, just because I have this cool piece of technology, if nobody teaches the teacher how to use it, that's a problem. But also, if the kids don't think it's cool, just because somebody who bought it thinks it's cool, if the kids say this is dumb, well, that's a waste, right? I mean, you need to have that student buy-in and be like, hey, we would like to have this, and I'm sure you run into this, when you're work at Dell, but talking to the kids about, hey, what would we like our lab to look like? What would we like the courses to look like? What would, what games would we like to have in our esports program? I'm sure all those conversations come up. And if you don't listen to that, you don't listen to the students, you're going to have this amazing thing you spend tons of money on, and the kids are going to be like, this is not what we wanted.
Yeah, they'll wait for the after hours when they can go and play and do what they wanted to do in there.
Exactly. So
we used to say, and it was kind of when I was a principal, big thing is no decision about us without us. And I really think that's a good mantra to have with any decision when it comes to students' work, because I feel like when I was a kid, it didn't matter. Like, nobody asked what I wanted. Nobody, no one was interested. But things have changed so much that you can't get around needing the input and the value, and knowing that kids want to. I really do believe kids want to learn. They want to be engaged in school. My kids, they went back to school today. It's January 5th here when we're recording this. I don't know when this will be released, but like, they're really excited to go to school, but mainly to go be with their friends.
Right.
They want to be there. They want those interactions. But the thing they tell you is that, I mean, the lesson's not relevant, or it's not exciting. And not that everything has to be like super engaging, because I don't believe that's true, because that's not life. Like, sometimes you just have to sit down and grind. Like when Mike's writing his book, or Jeremiah, when you're doing your dissertation, like sometimes you just got to sit down and grind out hard stuff. Like that's life. Sometimes you have to rake the leaves. I mean, just do those little things. But at the same time, to be able to get a little bit of input, and that's kind of a big catchphrase right now is student voice and choice. And it sounds awesome, but it scares the lights out of educators because you feel like you're losing control. And I think one of the challenges we have to face is how do we help empower the kids, but also have that balance of we have a direction we're going, we have a purpose, we have an end goal to help these individual students. And I, again, the metaverse stuff makes me really, really nervous. But when I hear you two talk about it, you make me feel a little more comfortable because it's not eliminating those interactions, not eliminating that person to person. It's just creating that in a different space that might actually create more opportunities for kids than take them away.
Well, and to bring this sort of to the esports side around it, I think that's some of the conversations that often I like to have with the districts, because often the focus is on how do we get a team that's in there playing, competing, and that, because that's the sports aspect of it. But if you look at sort of the culture in which esports has grown out of, it is more of that, let's get together and play together. Let's, interact. This is about who we are.
Yes.
And so you look at, why don't you start more with that sort of club approach so that you have a much larger group and students have a place to be while they're even at school. And they have this opportunity to be engaged with others who have interest, whether they're the best on Smash Bros. or League of Legends or whatever you're playing or not, and whether they make the quote unquote cut, it allows the culture of gaming and playing to continue on in the school environment and support the students and give them that place of belonging in a school where often you don't have or you struggle to have. And so that's a lot of times the conversation we're having with the districts is to think about the broader purpose of why you're really wanting to have these types of programs to make them meaningful, back to both of your points, for the students.
Yeah. Well, we know this is pretty consistent across the nation. 80% of the kids that are in esports programs have never been in an after school program before. So, we know we're reaching an audience of kids that have not been engaged in school, and no matter, it doesn't even matter what the school size is. It is pretty consistent with that number. So if you're reaching those kids who aren't involved now they feel like, hey, like you said, the sense of belonging. Now I feel like I belong in school because I have a thing. I'm wearing my jersey on Friday because we're competing, and now I want to do better in my other classes. And now my friend group has expanded because now I have a whole friend group that I go through the day, because now we're in the same class together and we talk about, League of Legends or whatever. That's what keeps us going, as opposed to, me just sitting in the back of the room and kind of just putting up with the teacher's stuff because I have to be there, right? My parents make me go or whatever. And now I really have a reason, I have to keep my grades high because I want to be on the esports team. I want to compete, maybe that's one of the things that people do. So, you're absolutely right. We're all talking about, the engagement piece is so huge. And I've talked about this before, but I always think, we're really, as schools, we're really, hip on plans of study. What are you going to take when you're a freshman? What class are you going to take when you're a sophomore? How are you going to get through high school? And I talked about this in my dissertation, but I think plans of engagement are much more important. What classes or what activities are you gonna help me find or establish so that I want to be at school, so that I will learn and do my plan of study. So, what's going to keep me here and keep me interested in school if I don't have, 20 friends and I'm not a basketball player, or I'm not on the drama team, or I'm not into plays or whatever, what's the thing? And, I would say esports is our thing, but if crocheting is the thing that you need to start to keep me, keep 10 kids involved, let's start crocheting. If that's what the club that we need, let's do that. So.
Yeah, we were talking, I work with a group that crosses North America with those who started up or already had going, but mostly started up virtual programs for students and then kept them going for a subgroup of the students because they saw the value for some students. But one of the conversations we were just having was around this idea of relationship mapping and making sure that all of the students involved in the program have meaningful connections with other students, with at least one adult that is in the program, so that they don't, to your point, sort of just fade out in the back of the classroom, but they are engaged ongoing. And so purposely tracking, not in a big brother way, it's a ask the student, talk to the student way. It's not a behind the scenes way, but really tracking with the students and saying, okay, how are you being engaged? Who are you interacting with? What is your interest, that we could make sure that's a part of what you're doing. And so it's really interesting that is becoming more and more of the conversation of how do we ensure students are involved. We're actually doing this too around, even as we're looking at some of the pathways that was mentioned that you work with, Dr. Russell, around with some of the curriculum and stuff. But the idea of, even with a series of courses, you still need this continuum of opportunities that are beyond the curriculum aspect. It's a club. It's you want to go and crochet, great. But it's opportunities of going and talking with and meeting with people who are in the field that you might be interested in. And might is the key word. You go meet with them, you say, no, I'm not now anymore. Never mind, I want to go somewhere else. Small little opportunities, challenges, or maybe again, you go in and you decide you don't want to play on these sports, but hey, I like talking about it. And I'm the one that always remember the stats. So I'm going to take my time and try and figure out this whole shoutcasting thing, So it's really looking across what are those continuum of opportunities that we're providing with the students, along with whatever their pathway might be.
We talk a lot about the one caring adult, and you mentioned this, and I think Trevor actually has a really great story. I don't know if you've shared that on the podcast about the student that had never asked about, he was wearing a jersey, and you're like, I asked him about it, and he's like, nobody's ever asked me before. Like,
Yeah,
what that
he
is.
he was in my office for like the 320th time because he had just like punched a hole in a window in our like secure special ed classroom, and he had a jersey on. I'm like, what is that? And he lightens up, and all of a sudden he's like the best kid in my school because it was his esports jersey, and I knew nothing about this at the time. This was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And all of a sudden, I'm the first person this kid finds in the morning because he wants to tell me about the game he just got done playing. And that was like, I should have known it then, but the light bulb didn't go off because I was still so jaded to what esports was. I think my own biases didn't want to see it, but I should have seen it then, because even once, that was one example. And then when I decided to leave being a principal, and I told my school that I was going to leave being a principal, I had kids who would come talk to me that would never come talk to me before because I was a part of an esports team in esports,
Right.
or that I supported esports. And it was crazy to me how common that was, that I just did not, I just totally didn't see it. And again, that was my own biases. But that's part of what I talk to every day when I talk to schools. And I'm sure you experience that as well, Jeremiah, in your work, that half the time you're just educating people on what it is and it isn't. And kind of like putting out those fears of, and it kind of like you mentioned Second Life. Like I just did a quick Google. I'm like, I could see how there could be some good things, and I could see how there could be some.
Well, you heard me say, please, listeners, don't think that I'm now advocating for it. This is something, 12 years ago.
Yeah. Yes, but with anything, but that's the thing. And this is something Mike and Christy talk about, and I love how they've talked about this before. All our kids are doing it, but no one's teaching them how to do it. All of our kids are playing esports, but no one's teaching them how to be a safe, appropriate gamer online. And I got my own personal experiences with one of my best friends who, just to cut to it, like he took his life. And I truly believe some of the things that led to the darkness that he got into were some of the really negative things that he experienced through things like Twitch and Discord, and like the crazy long amounts of addiction and time he had to gaming. And I deep down believe that if he had better boundaries, if someone had taught him better, now that doesn't exclude some of the things that happened, but no one had ever taught him, hey, you got to think about how much time we're doing this. You got to think about the people we're interacting with. And when I heard Mike and Christy first say that we need to teach our kids how to be gamers, I'm like, that's Anthony. Like that was totally Anthony.
Yeah.
And so I know there's other Anthony's out there with anything, and that's life in general. I know that. But just the importance of educating people through what's taking place.
I haven't made this connection before, but we've been doing some work over in the Boston area and working with a school there. And the leader there, brilliant man, he was really just recognizing that some of the support that he needed to be providing with his students who are more in an urban setting was the whole idea of how to purposely develop your network, how to self-advocate. Some of those things, and I've carried that with me, and we look at it and bring it into different areas. But even though we've developed some curriculum and have the support, just as you were talking about, and how do we help students think about being good gamers, I never connected those two till you were just talking about it. How do we ensure that we talk to them about we talk about building their brand, yes, but what about building their network and being purposeful about that network building? And tying that over into, just like you said, look, there's some bad networking that can happen as you're in the esports world. Let's talk about how you purposely build positive and things that will actually help and move forward, gaming in general, but positive and good gaming that's beneficial.
To go back to something you said a minute ago, talking about finding that meaningful adult. We used to do an activity when I was a principal. We do it in two ways. One, we'd have the students identify which teacher they most identified with, and then you'd have that aha moment of, oh man, I sure thought I was connecting with teacher X or students, and I'm not. And then we also had the teachers, like we actually put all the students' pictures up on the gym wall, and we had the teachers walk around with little tabs and put a tab next to the student that they most identify with, or a student that they feel like they connect with best. And so it was fascinating. It was fascinating to see as you walk around, you would see what students didn't have a dot by their face. You knew that was the student that we need to figure out who's going to be that one adult or charismatic adult with them. And then again, you do that in reverse. Then you ask the kids. Here's what I will tell you: don't share that publicly with a group of teachers. Don't allow that to become public knowledge, because what we accidentally found was there are some teachers that thought they were like the super cool popular teacher, but no kids actually liked them. And I can remember sitting in a really, really awkward PLC meeting, and Ryan was like, what's the deal? Like, I'm really good friends with student X, and student X didn't put that teacher's name on any of the documents. Like, yeah, let's not share this publicly next time. Let's keep that a little more internal communication. So
since Jeremiah has a very cool background, I had to change mine. I had to make it something fun. So.
Well, I have to confess, I had to switch computers, and now I'm on my favorite, my Alienware, but I didn't have all of the preset backgrounds and things that I usually use that go with it when I'm talking esports. So I had to go with my, my geek self.
Yep.
Bunch of dorks.
Speaking my language, my friend, we're on the same page right here. So,
as I tell Mike, I love the Star Trek stuff. So anytime you can bring out Star Trek, it's awesome. So
he just does that to get under my skin. He knows what that is, but he's just being a little bit of a. He's trying to antagonize me a little bit. So, yeah, he just pokes me.
Got to poke you a little bit.
All right, I know where you live. It's fine.
That's right. So
I definitely know where you work. So.
Yes. So I'm curious, Jeremiah, where do you see things going? I mean, you kind of saw, in some ways, you saw the future 10 years ago, whether you knew it at the time or not. We're not there yet. Where are things headed? And maybe even, I would love to know kind of with Dell. I mean, I would think you're kind of on the tip of the spear in a lot of ways, with a company that is actively, I would assume, developing things to support some of those platforms. Where are things headed, and what are some ways that we as an esports company and as educators can be on the front end of supporting stuff?
Yeah, interesting. And that's a huge question, right? Yes. So I think one of the aspects long time ago, I had a chance to hear from a visionary. And now that you can see me, those of you can see the gray in my beard, and you heard I started teaching in the 90s. So, I've got the bad back to go with the time of carrying the weight so of learning. But no, I think that one of the things a while back that someone talked to me about is that we tend to do, and everyone says this pendulum approach, but what you kind of look at is that can even be true within technology itself and its adoption and use. And so we kind of had this time, and so if you track that through, you look at, we had mobile, and everything went to the phone. Well, we needed something different with this higher compute needs around, whether it's the metaverse, whether it's gaming. And so you saw people start to get more towards, they still had that, but in terms of gaming and such, we needed the higher compute. I'm seeing in the reports I'm reading is that people are trying to figure out how to have it back into the all-in-the-one device and such. And I think that then we'll swing back again. But I think in terms of the shorter term sort of future, I think we're seeing a lot of that happening. I think in some ways, as we talk about esports and education, though, that can be some real positive aspects, because I often work through the aspect of accessibility on a variety of fronts. Do students have access to be able to practice at home, to the technologies that they need? Also accessibility in terms of accessibility to different programs and having some modifying type joysticks or controllers and things like that. And so as I look at making this the core root, as we were talking earlier, around sort of an esports club where you're saying all are welcome, please come and play, are truly all able to come and play. And that's always been a concern of mine. And I love the fact that we are thinking about how do we make this so that I can do it on, a Chromebook. I can do it on a phone. Now we lose some of the cool stuff that I like when I geek out when you go to those sort of platforms. But that's sort of a trend that I'm sort of seeing there. As I look in terms of education, though, I'd say we are seeing everyone now talking esports in the K-12 space. And everyone wants to think about this. And what I do like is that overall, with what, Mike, Christy, you're doing, the idea around having this tied to curriculum is great. I feel like and this is this call, this is those who listen into this podcast need to be really careful about is, again, what we were talking earlier, how do we involve the students? How do we make sure that it's in the best interest of the students, but also really thinking about the future? So for example, I hear a lot of districts saying, we're going to create this esports pathway. Okay, good. What are students going to do with that when they get out into the work world? You create a CTE or a VocaTech, whatever term you use, wherever you're listening to this, but that career or that workplace type opportunity, great. First of all, what's a certification that you can really get that's meaningful? Mm-hmm. But two, what are the students going to do with that? Yeah. And so we need to ask that question and be thoughtful about it. And we have answers, right? And so do you, Mike, and the work. So we have answers around that, but we have to just make sure that we're guiding that conversation as people sort of jump on this hype cycle. We've heard of that we want to make sure that we're helping guide that conversation, because I think it does have, this whole call was about that, the passion and triggering into the passions. So I think that's sort of where we're headed, is one, making it more accessible, tying it more towards the academic or curricular. And then our goal as those who are already in it is to just help guide that so that we are making it more accessible and that we are tying it to the meaningful futures of our students, and not just because it's cool and we could do this and we get lots of students to sign up for our program. So,
yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree with you on that. It is frustrating to see a lot of programs being developed that are like, hey, you're going to be an esports manager. And I'm like, well, what is that? I mean, what is an esports manager? I don't know what that does. I mean, so I think that's something we try to be cognizant of, and many in this industry try to be cognizant of. But like you said, there are others out there who are just like, hey, this esports thing's really catching on. Let's, how do we, I want to always say it's a money grab, and I hate to say that. I hate to be that way, but I mean, I think the curriculum really does, the courses do help embed it into the school and make it part of the normal school day. But yes, we do need to really, all of us, like you said on this call and all over the industry, we need to really put some thought into how we make those pathways and what is the end goal, what's the certificate, or what am I going to do with this when I get done? What, can I go apply at Dell and say, hey, I have this esports degree of some sort, whatever that is. What is Dell going to do? Why does that get me hired at Dell? I mean, what would Dell be looking for, or EA, or Activision Blizzard, or wherever you want to go? So right now, if you go get an esports degree, that if I took that to Dell, you for sure would be like, that doesn't really help. I mean, I don't know what that means, right? You'd probably be the most critical person if that showed up, right? So we and in this group, we need to be the ones who kind of, I think, shepherd that along and figure out what that actually means. So
it's interesting. In kind of previous work as the principal, we talked to schools who were developing these like CT pathways for like wind turbine technology, for example. But what they were able to do was they had local organizations, local wind turbine companies that essentially would be, hey, you go through this program, and then you're going to have a job when you walk away from it. And then I don't think we're there yet in the esports world, but I could see at some point those potential is there, because as schools do, whether it's, I mean, you could pick the engineering, construction, auto mechanics, whatever it is, that stuff is embedded because everyone understands it. And there's clear, hey, you could do auto tech in high school. You're going to spend half your day working out an auto tech or a repair shop down the road. And when you graduate, you have a job. I imagine eventually we'll get there in esports technology. It's just not there yet. But then you have a whole equity piece too, because someplace in little rural Kansas, rural New York, they don't have necessarily an engineering firm or technology company that you could easily intern for. Whereas some of these more rural places where, and you got to be cognizant of that equity piece, these rural places don't have those. And so that'll be interesting as you guys talk about those career places, the pathway piece, where that does go. But more than anything, the important piece is talk to the kids about it. Make sure you have their feedback. And as we kind of talked about before, and Jeremiah, you hit it so eloquently, of ask them, what do you think? What do you like? what do you enjoy about this? And let that be a driver. So any kind of last thoughts, comments here before we jump to the next thing?
One more thing on that. I think the other thing that we're battling as an esports industry is, how long has construction been around? How long has automotive, how long have those industries been around so we could develop all those programs? Now, I think now we're all in kind of a hurry because we do see the value in it, but we haven't had the 100 years of evolution from the first car to now. We haven't had all that time to implement and see where all this goes, and be able to look back 20 years ago and go, oh, what did this look like? And what skills were useful then that are still useful now, and how we develop those programs. So we really are trying to push the envelope a lot here because of the earliness of the industry, even though some of us have been doing this for a long time, 10 years or 20 years, depending on when you define when esports started. But really, in the last 5 to 6, 7 years is really when things have really started to develop. So I think we need to also keep that in our minds. Like we're very young as an industry still. So
yeah.
Well, so Jeremiah, we always have to kind of wrap things up, a one special question to kind of ask. So our one special question, if you did, what was your New Year's resolution?
Good. All right. So we are actually talking about this. My New Year's resolution is to fail more. With that whole fail forward mindset, but kind of looking back, I can be a very thoughtful person and a planner. And earlier on in my career, I'd just jump in. And I don't know if I still want to just completely jump in, and because I can show you the bumps and bruises around that. But I think that jumping in more and let's just do it and learn along the way kind of thing. I think I need to get more into that. So my New Year's resolution is to fail more.
Ooh, okay. Mike, what do you got?
I like that. Wow. I am not prepared for this question, Trevor. I don't typically do these New Year resolutions thing. I like Jeremiah's. I've learned a lot from failure, so I'm going to go with that. I think I'll just keep failing and see how it goes.
I don't think that was his point, Mike.
So,
It's a purposeful fail that Jeremiah's talking about.
I'm it's jest, but I mean, there's a lot of value in, and that's something we don't teach a lot of kids anymore. Is there is a fail? They are afraid to fail. I mean, and we see that a lot in our kids. So I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. I think that is a great resolution. So, Trevor.
Well, I'm going to go with an old cliche because I just had my physical the other day and my cholesterol is a little bit high, so I need to drop a few lbs. I'm pretty physically active, but I gained 20 pounds when I left the principalship, which is crazy because I've had other friends that gained weight when they became a principal. I gained weight when I left being a principal because now I'm at a
shows you were walking the halls. Yeah, good
exactly.
for
I was always up. I was never in my office. But now I live in an office. And so, I mean, my movement sometimes is my standing desk going up, my standing desk coming down. So I need to be more intentional about movement. I exercise, but there you go. He's moving.
Yeah.
Just because you exercise once a day, that's not enough. It's that daily movement that I got to get back in the rhythm of. So it's even just forced myself to get up every 20, 30 minutes and go do something. Because I could sit on my computer all day, I realize, without even realizing I've been here for 4 hours and I haven't moved. So that's my New Year's resolution is to get my tail up and moving more.
You're probably less stressed now though. So maybe that
has
you probably were stressed
balanced.
so much you were eating or your body was just burning it off because of all the stress.
That's true.
Yeah, no, that's a whole other podcast, Mike, right there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
My overall wellness improvement.
Is our man Alex Hurley, our man behind this, our sage behind the stage, does he have a New Year's resolution this year?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be with Trevor. I have gained weight also from not being a teacher, being up and around. I used to be a shop teacher, so I would be running all over that shop, preventing injuries. So, being more intentional about trying to lose some weight because the pants are getting a little tight. So,
they make men's stretchy pants now. If you didn't know, Lee and Dockers make some fantastic stretchy man pants. I'm not gonna lie, you wouldn't know these are stretchy pants I'm wearing, but they're stretchy pants. So.
All right, so I think we all have to agree to buy something like this that reminds you to get up and move versus going out and buying the stretchy pants.
Yeah.
If you're going to invest in something for your health, my friend, because I did buy those, I will be honest, when I moved to a more desk job.
These are great, man. I got a lot of flex, but they also accommodate my growing waistline. So
it's fun to hear you guys all talk about this because that's been my whole life. That's why I never do the I'm going to lose weight thing because that just doesn't work for me. I have to do it differently. So I have lost over the years. I have lost quite a bit of weight, but yeah, I
think it's less about the weight and more about the health.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's more about the health. Yeah. That same thing is said it in. For me, it's about my back, right? And that sort of thing. So it's just, what are you doing for your health, mental and physical?
True.
Oh, heck
Absolutely.
yeah!
Absolutely.
Here we go. Again, maybe that needs to be another podcast, Mike. We dig
into your next one.
The mental health piece because I know we can all openly talk about that. So, well, Jeremiah, thank you so much for being on our show and sharing any final words of wisdom for us before we wrap up today.
I'd say have fun, right? I think too much, you mentioned the past couple of years, we all kind of got buried with the stress of life. And I'm really trying to find how do we have fun? And that's to your listeners too. If you're not having fun, find a way to have some fun, even if it's just spending a little bit of time listening to one of these podcasts, right? Okay. So have some fun.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, tell us real quick, our socials, where you can find us. So, Jeremiah, how can people find you on social media, LinkedIn? Just how do they see about what you're up to?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I used to be on Twitter. Haven't been as much recently. If you watch the news, you know why. But I am over there, so I can always connect up there as well. And, quick Google search will find me on all my info there at Dell too. So I'm around.
Awesome. Mike?
I am at Russ the Teach and on Twitter and on LinkedIn, just Michael Russell.
There you go. And same for me. It's Goertzen_edu on Twitter. And you just search Trevor Goertzen on LinkedIn. It's either me or a hockey player from Canada that you find. So I'm not the hockey player from Canada, but all right. Hey, thanks so much, guys. And from our Gaming Concepts podcast, we are now wrapping up.